My name is Ruth. I'm 82 years old. And 3 years ago, a doctor sat across from me in a small office with a window that faced a parking lot and told me I had approximately 6 months to live. I want to tell you what happened after that, not because my story is miraculous, because it isn't, but because what I did in the weeks and months that followed taught me more about how I had been living than the previous 79 years combined. The diagnosis was advanced ovarian cancer, stage 4, which means it had already gone places it wasn't supposed to go. My daughter was with me in that office, and I remember that she started crying before I did. In fact, I'm not sure I cried at all that day. I sat there and listened to the doctor explain the statistics and the options and the timelines. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, I had a thought that surprised me. I thought, well, now I know. There was something almost clarifying about it. The uncertainty I had been quietly carrying my whole life, the low hum of worry that something was wrong, that time was running out, that I wasn't doing things right, was suddenly replaced by a specific, concrete fact. 6 months. Now I knew. And knowing, strangely, felt like the first solid ground I had stood on in years. I want to tell you what I did not do. I did not order supplements from the internet at 3 in the morning. I did not fly to a clinic in another country. I did not spend my savings on treatments my doctors hadn't recommended. I know people do those things, and I am not here to judge anyone for the choices they make when they are frightened. But I had reached a point in my life where I was tired of performing hope for other people's comfort. What I wanted was the truth about my body, about my habits, about the life I had built around myself, and I wanted to do something real with whatever time I had left. The first thing I changed was my sleep. This sounds small. It wasn't. I had slept badly for 30 years, waking at 2 in the morning, lying in the dark with my thoughts running, getting up exhausted, and calling it normal. My doctor had mentioned it before. My daughter had mentioned it. I had mentioned it to myself more times than I could count. And I had done nothing about it because there were always more urgent things to fix. What I understood after the diagnosis was that I had been treating my own body like a last priority for decades, and my body had been quietly keeping score. I started sleeping in a dark room. I stopped looking at my phone after 8 o'clock. I went to bed at the same time every night the way a child does, without apology. Within 3 weeks, I was sleeping through the night for the first time since my 50s. I do not believe this alone saved my life, but I believe it gave my body something it had been starved of for a very long time. The second thing I changed was what I ate. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but honestly. I had spent years eating quickly and alone at a kitchen counter, eating whatever was convenient, eating out of habit rather than hunger. I started cooking again, slowly, the way I used to cook when my children were young. Real food, not complicated. The kind of meals that take time to prepare and time to eat. I sat at the table. I tasted things. I stopped eating when I was full. These are not revolutionary ideas. Every doctor, every nutritionist, every grandmother alive has said some version of this. The difference was that I finally did it, not because I wanted to lose weight or look better, but because I had decided that my body deserved to be treated like something worth caring for. The third change was the hardest. I left 3 relationships that had been making me sick for years. I use that word carefully, and I mean it literally. Relationships that left me anxious, depleted, and smaller every time they ended. A friendship of 20 years that had quietly become a place where I went to be criticized and came home feeling like a failure. A family obligation that I had maintained out of guilt for so long that I could no longer remember what it had ever given me. And a habit of saying yes to people who had never once asked me how I was doing. I do not want to make this sound easy. Leaving people, even people who are hurting you, is one of the loneliest things you can do. I cried. I second-guessed myself. There were months where I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. But what I noticed, slowly, was that the quiet in my life after those losses was not the quiet of loneliness. It was the quiet of rest. My body, I think, knew the difference. I went back for my scan at 6 months, expecting confirmation of what the doctors had told me. The results were not what anyone had predicted. The cancer had not progressed the way the original timeline had suggested. My oncologist used the word unusual. He ordered more tests. 6 months became a year became 2, 2 became 3, and here I am, 82 years old, sitting in a chair in a house I have lived in for 40 years, telling you this story. I am not going to tell you that sleep and vegetables and letting go of difficult people cured my cancer. I don't know that. Nobody knows that. What I know is that I am still here when the numbers said I wouldn't be, and that the life I am living now feels, for the first time in decades, genuinely like mine. Not managed, not endured. Mine. What the diagnosis gave me, and I recognize how strange this sounds, was permission. Permission to stop doing the things that were quietly destroying me. Permission to sleep, to eat, to rest, to say no, to leave, to stop pretending. I had spent my entire adult life waiting for permission to take care of myself. And it turned out I had been waiting for a piece of paper from a doctor in an office with a window that faced a parking lot. That is the part that stays with me. Not the diagnosis, not the survival, but the fact that it took all of that for me to finally decide that my own life was worth protecting. If you are waiting for your own version of that moment before you make the changes you already know you need to make, I want you to hear me. You do not need a diagnosis. You do not need a deadline. You need to decide today that you are worth the same urgency you give to everything and everyone else. The sleep matters. The food matters. The relationships that leave you depleted every single time, they matter more than you have been willing to admit. None of it is glamorous. None of it will make a good story at a dinner party. But your body is listening to every decision you make, and it has been keeping score for longer than you know. Start now. Not because you're running out of time, but because the time you have is worth more than the way you've been spending it.